some way or another aware of that, because I mean we have the United Nations organization here, and they have been trying to pursue that. And of course, last year was a little bit slow on getting a lot much anything done, but hopefully that we can achieve that more as the years come ahead. Now, most people know the International Institute in St. Louis mainly as the organizer of the Festival of Nations. Interesting enough, I found out that the Hispanic Leaders Group used to be the one that was involved with it, pretty started or had some involvement with it. But anyway, most people see as the Festival of Nations as part as the International Institute. Can you give us a better picture of what is the International Institute? What is it all about, and its role within the St. Louis community?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the International Institute has this broad vision. Its vision is basically um, creating a more connected, thriving, and inclusive society. And this is really important. The all the work of the International Institute in all the forms that it takes is geared towards building a thriving and inclusive society. That's the blanket. How does it do this? It does this by by creating, connecting immigrants, their families, and the wider society, by creating benefits for immigrants, their families, and the wider society. That's the mission. The mission is basically connecting um, uh, this communities, and it manifests. So that going from the vision, the mission, and the way that it does its work. I say to people that when I applied for this position, I was looking at the tip of the iceberg. Oh, and since I joined, I have been become an archaeologist, and I'm continue to discover the incredible work of the International Institute. For over 100 years, the International Institute has embarked on welcoming immigrants to these communities, into this community, and creating a pathway for them to become successful. That encapsulates the work of the Institute. And as generations have gone by, the Institute has developed a, a wide array of programs to respond to the needs of these various immigrants that are coming. So whether it was those who came from Europe in the early parts of the 19th century, to those who came here after the Second World War, to the Vietnamese population that came in the 70s, to the Bosnians that came in the 90s, to the Congolese and the Afghanis that are coming now, the Somalis. It has evolved in the way that it provides services. The Institute works in very close collaboration with the U.S. Committee for Refugee and Immigration to provide a set of programs for refugees that arrive here, and has a certain period of time within which it has to resettle those refugees. So it essentially deals with three or four kinds of people. These refugees that have to be resettled within 90 days. Um, Although their work doesn't end there, it continues with as immigrants for at least 5 years. It also has to do with asylees. So refugees are people who would have escaped their countries as a result of conflict and elect or go through a process to come to the United States. Asylees are people who would have escaped their country and are in the United States and cannot go back as a result of the fear persecution in their countries. But you also have immigrants who come here for various other reasons, and that are here and need to be integrated because they are part of this society. And so the International Institute provides services for these various groups of people. And it could range from whether it's providing English language classes, providing housing, providing job opportunities for them, and teaching them skills to be prepared for job interviews, even sometimes providing clothing that they can use for those interviews, equipping the housing for these immigrants. We also do other programs that go beyond just focusing on the refugees, but programs for the wider society. And that's where the Festival of Nations comes in, for example, because that's designed to give the wider community an opportunity to discover the beautiful diversity that lies within this community, and how that diversity can enrich our lives as people who live in this community. So that's the work that the International Institute does. All of that focus towards building a more inclusive society.
Interesting, interesting. Now, I understand that when refugees come to Missouri, this is not necessarily a decision taken by the refugees. Instead, it is a decision taken by organizations that run these programs. Does the International Institute have a say or input on these decisions?
No, the International Institute doesn't have a say or input in the decisions as to who comes to Missouri.
Okay.
Um, it is a long and extensive process that sometimes takes 8 to 10 years before the people leave refugee camps, which could be anywhere in the world, to come to the United States. And in the past few years has even become a more complicated, because there's a lot of screening that goes on as a result of
Right.
The fear of terrorism and all of that. So it takes a while for them to get to the United States. The only way that the International Institute can influence the outcome is based on the capacity that we have to be able to resettle refugees.
Okay.
So we would send and we do an annual assessment of capacity, so to speak. And based on that capacity, the allocation of the number of people that are coming is made based on our capacity. But there are also other things that influence this, as I'm learning as I go along, is that you're more likely to have more Congolese coming if you already have Congolese settlement there, because it is better for those people to fit into a community. And that could be the reason why you can see that there are waves of certain groups of people that come through over the years, like the Bosnians that we're talking about. And I use Congolese because we saw in recent years an increase in the number of Congolese that are coming as well.
Interesting, interesting. Yeah. So, how is this work of the International Institute relate or correlate with the work that you were doing at GCI?
Well, once I worked at JCI, I spent 17 years of, I tell people that I lived in St. Louis, but I lived here half the time, because I spent a lot of time in various communities around the world. It is one thing embracing cultures, having a mindset to embrace cultures. It's another thing actually living and walking in the shoes of those people in their local settings. And I always joke to people that my work at JCI went from a 5-star hotel in the morning to sitting in the favelas in Brazil and sharing a meal with people, because that was the reality. And understanding what the local reality was the only way in which we could have young people finding solutions to problems within their communities. In coming to the International Institute, I think one of the things that I learned in my previous position, because I spent a lot of time implementing strategy that could design an organization to be attractive to young people. Every organization must build the future and not the past. What obtained, I always say, the glorious days of yesterday will not come back.
Right.
Glory lies ahead, so prosperity lies ahead. And in a world that is changing and changing fast, every organization, every association, every entity must be in a transformational mode now to be able to cope with the future that's coming upon us. And I spent a lot of time in my previous organization developing and implementing strategy for young people because that's really focusing on the future.
Mhm.
And in that regard, just looking at the work that the International Institute has done for the last 100 years and trying to project into what the future is going to look like, I know that there's bound to be significant transformation that takes place for us to be here for the next 100 years and build the next generation of an inclusive and even more inclusive St. Louis. Um, so I think that the perspective, the diverse cultural perspective, and the fact that I spend a lot of time working for young people gives me a very different perspective of how to build for the future.
Which correlates to something that I wanted to ask you. In an interview with the St. Louis Public Radio, you talked about capitalizing on the talents of the immigrant, right? This is exactly what the International Institute is trying to achieve. So, can you provide us with some examples of what the immigrant population can do to be more or better equipped to truly share their talents and achieve a greater success at it?
Yes. So I am an immigrant, and I go around a lot in immigrant circles across this country, and I speak a lot to immigrants. The first thing that I would say is that we need to create the space for immigrants to take ownership. We live here, we are here. This is our community. But for many immigrants, they still see this place as the stranger's land. They still see themselves as strangers, even 30, 40, 50 years after they've arrived here.
Right.
And you know, and yet they also expect that this society embraces them in everything that it does in terms of policy and all of that. But we know that if you are not seated at the table, if you do not have a voice, if you are not part of the conversation, then you are left out of policymaking, you are left out of the outcomes. So I think one of the things that we must do for immigrants is not just equip them to survive, because they have the capacity to go beyond survival. They have the capacity to contribute to the grand design of what America is supposed to be. And we have to uplift them. We have to make them see themselves as the answers to some of the challenges that this country faces because they are here. But we cannot only do that by addressing the question with the immigrants. We have to do that by addressing the question with the wider society. Because if they are here, then they count. And if they count, they must be seated at the table. So we need to think creatively about ways in which we give the space for the immigrant population to be part of the city council as well, to be part of conversations towards infrastructural development in this community. We have to bring them to the table, bring out their voices, and that goes beyond just providing them with basic necessities. We also have to think holistically about how they grow developmentally in this society.
Yeah, interesting you say that because many of our conversations that we have had within the Hispanic leaders, we have identified that the lack of representation at the local, state, and federal level as a roadblock in gaining a greater support for our immigrant community. In your opinion, How do you think we can overcome this?
Well, I think we start by getting the immigrant population to own certain initiatives, right? So now I'm talking to the Hispanic leadership group, right? And the Hispanic leadership group should not only be talking to the Hispanic leaders, right?
Right.
The Hispanic leadership group should be talking to the wider society about some of the things, the talent that is within this group, how it can affect change or bring transformation to the wider society. And I say this again as an immigrant, recognizing the fact that even me could be more involved in determining what the outcomes are in my own community. But there's just a certain mindset that we need to get to be able to create this. I know that what is really important for us as immigrants is we want to make sure that our families are okay, and we want to make sure that we prepare the next generation to be in a better place than we who came here as the first generation. And so we are consumed by that. But we cannot forget that outside our families is a society that needs to be welcoming to that next generation. And then we need to get involved. So yes, we need to figure out ways in which we could we could have this kind of conversations with various immigrant groups about their role in society and the things that they would like to see that's changing. What are some of the thoughts, and how can we take these ideas and make the ideas of the immigrant population mainstream?
Right. And you talked about that tapestry. I mean, you have talked about that tapestry that immigrants had to be woven into the culture, right? Now, when we
Yes.
look at the migration of various cultures in various cities within the United States, there's still that divide and that segregation of different cultures where the Latinos, Hispanics, the Bosnians, Chinese, and other cultures live in separate areas and are not necessarily part of that large community. How do you think we can really achieve that? I mean, we talk about it, but what are the steps, or how can we achieve that, really, that tapestry where we can, and then of course in turn have that representation?
Well, the first thing I'll say, if it was easy, this would have been done a long time ago. So this is not an easy task.
No.
But this is a task that we have to embark on in a way that is deliberate.
Right.
And we're blessed to have an organization like the International Institute in this community that has been here for 100 years. If it's been here, can you imagine what this community would have been without the International Institute? We cannot even imagine that, right?
Right.
So we need to figure out a way to say, if we are going to be here for the next 10, 15, 20 years, what kind of community do we want to see?
Right.
Unless we're able to imagine an alternative society, an alternative community, we cannot walk towards it. So if you ask people, and I'm going to be asking the question all through as I go along in the next few years, is if is an inclusive society possible in St. Louis? If the answer to that question is yes, then we have another question. Why have we not accomplished that? For me, the answer to that question is yes. It is possible, but it's only possible if each one of us, me, my neighbor, and my neighbor's neighbor, agree that this is something that we want for our society. And if we can paint that picture, then you can have people walking towards that.
Right.
Let's not focus on what distracts us. Let's not focus on the obstacles that may stand in our way. But what is the kind of community that we want? If everyone can see that picture, that beautiful picture in the distance,
Mm-hmm.
then we will begin to act like it. we will begin to have corporations and individuals and civil society organizations acting in that way. But sometimes, because we are human, we're so focused on solving the problems that exist today that we fail to see what the opportunities could be tomorrow. And the opportunity for tomorrow is reimagining or painting a picture of what tomorrow looks like, and then challenging ourselves to work towards it.
So, what do you envision yourself achieving at the International Institute when we talk about these issues? I mean, what are some of the things that you would like to accomplish within the next 5 years?
The first thing that I would like to do at the International Institute is to broaden the constituency of the Institute. When I say broaden the constituency of the Institute, is that, beyond the Festival of Nations, beyond taking care of providing assistance to immigrants and refugees, I really think that the International Institute can, what I would really want to accomplish is engage the wider society in understanding why it's important for us to provide the assistance to immigrants and refugees.
Mm-hmm.
Inclusion. I really would focus on trying to build an inclusive society. And building an inclusive society would mean that we have to change the narrative around immigrants and refugees, right?
Right.
And I'll pause here for a minute and just say, let us imagine America without immigrants. It doesn't exist.
No.
If the America, the concept, the idea, the notion, the very foundation of this country is based on immigrants. So if you take out immigrants from the equation, America ceases to exist. So with that in mind, we really need to, immigrants came yesterday, they're coming today, they will continue to come tomorrow. We can resist their coming. We can do everything to stop it, but it's not going to stop. They're going to keep coming. So what we need to do is actually build a society that understands that this is the fabric of America. People will keep coming. The way that we welcome and receive them will determine the way that they contribute to the outcomes of America. The people come here because they embrace hope. They don't come here to destroy, they come to build.
Exactly.
And the people who come here with the goal of embracing hope have the capacity to even fight more to achieve the dreams of America than people who are here already and that take it for granted.
Right.
And so for me, I would really want to see bring together, and this may be audacious and sometimes even foolhardy, but bring this community around the idea that we can really build an inclusive society and be an example for the rest of America to follow.
Oh, that would be awesome. I mean, and of course we'll be right with you. Hispanic Leaders Group this is something that we want to achieve as well. So count us in your fight and make sure that you keep us, abreast and how we can, because the reality is, as you said, it is working together. I mean, we have all these immigrant organizations that if we work together, we can achieve it. I mean, we all will benefit, right? It will be a benefit
Absolutely.
for every, not only the immigrant population, but also the people that are here. So we hope that we can achieve that. We do have a quick question here, and they're asking if the organization, the International Institute, it can provide opportunities to young people.
Oh yes. So it is working with other. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So everything that I said cannot be achieved by the International Institute alone, right? We are only as strong as the community that's around us, and collaboration has to be one of the key ways in which we achieve our goals in this community. So yes, I know currently there is we have a young friends group, but I also know that there is a significant need for mentoring of young immigrants, and that there is significant need of that. So we are totally open to working with other groups that have the capacity and resources to sustain the work that we're doing, particularly with young people.
That is good because I mean, you talked about how you work with the youth and how the future really is building that youth. So definitely, we need to find more ways that we can embrace them and pull them into the fight, right?
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely, yes, we have to do that.
I invite all the audience to go ahead and post your questions here. We definitely want to make sure that we address all your questions, and if you could just put them in the chat, because I mean, we have somebody here that has a lot of expertise, and we want to take an advantage. And it is here meetings like this that we can build our future, not only for our organizations, but the future of our community, the St. Louis community. And all we were trying to do is make it a better place, right? I do have another question. How do you see, in your opinion, I mean, COVID 19 affected our immigrant population tremendously, and what can we do as a community to move forward?
Yeah. Well, the besides the pandemic, there are a lot of other things that cumulatively created a lot more inequalities, and the pandemic gave us the opportunity to really see the inequalities that exist in American society, one, but to a larger extent across the world as well. That we've seen that the whether it's from employment to healthcare, we to even social benefits, we saw that those who were well to do um, benefited a lot more, or not benefited, were a lot more protected
Right.
during the pandemic than those who didn't. It gives us the opportunity to draw the lessons from the pandemic, that at the end of the day, um, we're in the same boat, and we have to create more um, equality in our societies, without which, at the end of the day, it comes back to haunt all of us. The pandemic um, did not decide it was going to affect. The virus didn't choose based on class who it was going to affect. Anybody who was exposed, it affected our entire healthcare system, which had an impact on everybody. It affected our educational system, which had an impact on everybody, entertainment, our restaurants, and all of that. It affected everybody. And then we started seeing the inequalities, right? We started seeing that not every child had equal access to internet, and so they couldn't get the same level of education. And education in itself is one of the areas that, if we had to reimagine society and reimagine America, we have to rethink the way that education is delivered. There is no reason that a child that is born in one part of the city would have better education than a child that is born in another part of the city. It is insane that happens, and yet we expect to build an inclusive society. If the very nature of the kind of opportunities that we offer every child that is born is not the same,
Right.
it creates a problem for how the fabric of the society itself. And the same can be looked upon in healthcare, and looked upon even in the employment market, that suddenly we realize that there are some people who on a daily basis are putting their life at risk to sustain the entire population, and we give very little regard to that on a daily basis. That to have health care, it must be plugged to a job opportunity that goes away in a pandemic and therefore exposes an entire family in terms of leaving them without any safety net, so to speak. Those are all things that push us to rethink the kind of society that we've been building and what the future would hold. And this is why it's really important at this time that we focus a lot on this whole question of the kind of country that we want, the kind of society that we want, because we cannot take for granted that we have learned the lessons, because we don't want to forget them. Because if we forget them, then we will face this problem again in the future, and it would be reckless of us not to have taken corrective action.
Mhm. But the immigration committees, or I should say, the immigrants, a lot of times don't have the power to make those changes, right? So how can the immigrant community cope or better themselves based on what we have seen? I mean, for many, it took them totally by surprise because they lost their jobs. I mean, the moment that restaurants and the hotel industry minimize its employees, I mean, our immigrant communities have the one that been much more affected. So how can we, uh, in some way, alleviate or help mm, that minimize that impact on them?
Mm, yeah.
Because we can't receive some of the help that it's offered by the government. We're not actually, we don't have access to that.
Yeah. Well, I know that the let's hope that the Biden administration, which has really been looking at all of these issues from a different perspective.
Mhm.
I we all want things to change overnight, but the reality is that it's going to take some time, and I don't know whether things are going to change overnight. But our hope is that at least in the next 2, 3, 4 years, the government is going to play its part. But I think organizations like the International Institute, whilst only in St. Louis, really has to become an advocate for the immigrant population. And becoming an advocate means that one international institute alone cannot do it. One of the things that I've been looking for is really seeing how we can build a movement around America, working with other international institutes across the country, or other organizations that are supporting the work of refugees. This is a conversation that we are beginning to have as
Mhm.
a community as to how we can get together and have a stronger voice. In most cases, most of these organizations are so focused on providing the much needed help
Right.
to the immigrant population that they even do not have the resources to advocate, right? And that's why it's important to look beyond our constituency, to find other voices, to build alliances with other organizations to be able to have a strong voice for the immigrant population in America. And you do that by telling a different story. My way of advocacy is not focusing on the problem, it's focusing on the opportunity. It's focusing on what the future would look like if we were providing this. So
Mhm.
so instead of focusing on what the immigrants are not having now, it's trying to focus on what America could be if these immigrants had the opportunities now, and talking a lot more about that. That would be my approach. I had an experience with this once when in my former organization, which was created in St. Louis, by the way, by a young man whose goal, whose dream was to have a peace, a world where there was permanent and everlasting peace. Now that dream has never been accomplished, but the organization got to the point where they almost dismissed the fact that peace is possible. And we went the other way, and we created a campaign called Peace is Possible, which was totally against the concept that peace is not possible. And this was after asking people in a survey whether peace was possible, and 67% of the people saying it was not possible.
Wow.
We did a campaign, and through that campaign, we mobilized about 4 million people in one day, the 21st of September, and a campaign that who committed to the fact that peace was possible, which demonstrated to us that because nobody had been talking to them about the fact that peace is possible, and it led to the building of a movement. It even led to there's a state in the country of Malaysia called Sarawak that I would ask people to look up. But it's one of the states in which, well, Malaysia is predominantly a Muslim country. But in this state, you have at least 12 dominant religions living together. And I saw for myself across the street, there was a Catholic church, and on the other side, a mosque. And on Fridays, the mosque used the parking of the church, and on Sundays, the Catholic church used the parking of the mosque. They totally figured out that religion should bring us together rather than divide us. And in the same way, if we could demonstrate to people that the very essence of America's existence is to embrace these diverse cultures, which is not something that we talk about because we're stuck with trying to take away the obstacles that are currently here, that we don't see the big picture of what America truly represents. So advocacy it's the opportunity, and it's the way that we can change hearts and minds.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. It definitely has given us a lot to think about. No, I really appreciate your thoughts, and more importantly, it's very encouraging what you're talking about, and of course the work that we all need to do. I'm going to invite Maria Olivos for a moment, and she's going to be telling us about what we need to do next.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the presentation. It was really, really good. And we also have a survey or a feedback form that we would love for everybody attending to take a couple of minutes and complete it. I don't think it will take more than a minute, to be honest. It's just 5 questions that I'm going to launch right now. And it will really help us plan other events and give feedback to the presenter. So if you can just take a minute, I promise it won't take more than that. And that's great feedback for the group putting these events together. So thank you again for joining today.
While they're doing that, Arrey, can you tell us a little bit about your book? I know I mentioned that you have wrote. You had just published, I guess, at the end of last year, a book. And can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yes. So the book is called Bridging the Opportunity Gap. I wrote this book during the pandemic. So whilst I was locked down, I spent the time writing the book. And one of I was forced to publish the book even before I was ready, because I had sent out copies to some friends and journalists for review and feedback, and And one of them had called me back to say, tomorrow we're going to be reviewing your book on Forbes.com. So do you have it ready for people to start buying the book? And so I kind of precipitated the publishing of the book just because I had to respond to that opportunity. The book really focuses on a concept that I focus on. It is called, I always say that individuals, businesses or organizations that focus on their challenges will be defined by their challenges, whilst individuals, businesses or organizations that focus on their opportunities become defined by those opportunities. Organizations that have focused on their challenges typically struggle under the weight of those challenges and end up going away. And in the book, and I use the example of Sears and Amazon, that many people don't realize, especially the younger people, that's what Sears used to do is exactly what Amazon is doing today. Sears was the first company in the world that sent out catalogs to people's homes for you to select the items that you wanted to purchase, and Sears would have them delivered to your home. It is exactly the thing that Amazon is doing today, but doing that online. And the problem that Sears had was that they saw their sales declining, and they invested all their time trying to figure out why their sales was declining without necessarily embracing the opportunity of new technologies. So that book, so bridging the opportunity gap to me is the gap between the current state, the status quo, and the potential of a future state. So the potential that every organization has to grow, that's the gap. And how you bridge the gap is through a set of tools that include the mindset to be able to bridge the gap. And so I covered those set of tools in the book.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs and the people that are involved in business will be interested to read that book. Now, my recommendation would be that you also publish it on tape, because like myself, I spend a lot of time on the road, and it's harder for me to sit down and read. But if I can just have it audio, it is. And I know many of my colleagues and people that I have encountered, that's how they consume books. They do it in audio. And so that would be my recommendation, because I tried to find it on audio and it wasn't available.
No, not yet, because like I said, I precipitated the publishing of the book because of the Forbes, and I need to find 32 hours of time.
Well, I have started reading it and I have really enjoyed it, but I was hoping to finish it by this interview, but it's just not possible. I just didn't get it. But do we have any more questions that are coming from the audience? Let me see. Let's look at this chat here. I think that we must have covered everything we needed to say, because look at that. No, they're not bombarding us with questions, and if anybody wants to ask a question to Arrey, please go ahead and raise your hand, and so that way Mauricio can unmute you and you can address him directly. I mean, that to me, that would be the best way. Oh, we have Alejandra. Alejandra, of course, I am so glad to see that that she is raising her hand. Mauricio, can you unmute her, please?
Hi, Mr. Obenson. Can you all hear me?
We definitely can.
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. We've worked with Anna Crosland and my mom, a retired professor from SLU, St. Louis University, has worked with, I grew up literally working with the International Institute in one capacity or another through my parents, and have continued to do so. I wanted to say that what you were saying about uplifting the immigrants that come in, helping them integrate and becoming I mean, I always find it funny when people post racist comments on their iPhones when Steve Jobs's dad was a Syrian immigrant, and it's like you're literally posting racism on a machine, a technology invented by the son of an immigrant. So you know, it's always like of course, there's so many contributions and tax dollars and cultural richness. Um, the other thing was your point about the legacy. And as an attorney, I do estate planning. This is an offer that I'd like to make. I do this for churches, for sororities, for different groups, nonprofits, and have done this presentation for years. And that is the title of my presentation has evolved into breaking down systemic inequities via strategic estate planning. And that is something that having worked in different capacities, as I said, growing up with immigrants, from the very first account, I want them to have a TOD on it, a transfer on death. That should go directly, whether they have $500, $5,000, maybe 5 million, who knows? You know, the immigrant trajectory is often so positive, but every single dollar should go. And your vehicle, if all you have is a bank account and a vehicle, you know, the legacy for our children, we often think of, you know, I'm raising my children bilingually. I'm teaching them about my mother's foods, Latinx foods. We go to festivals, but we also have to think about them not having to reinvent the wheel, and not a single penny that has gotten scratched from, as you mentioned, the larger society's systemic barriers should be lost. Not one penny should be lost. And trust me when I say, you know, I do probate as well. You know, it is so expensive. I am expensive. I'm very expensive. It should be set up with the paperwork beforehand. So if that presentation would be of use to the staff members, to the people there, I already looked up your email on the website. I will send you that. I will reach out. I would love to give. Like I said, I've been giving it for years, and I've always gotten tremendously positive feedback. So other attorneys as well.
Well, Alejandra, I'm going to hold you to to account with this, because we need this. We need to think about creative ways of supporting the immigrant population. And if you have answers, this is what we need from our community. And so I'll be looking forward to receiving your email, and I hope to reach out to you. And let me also say thank you for your continuous support to the work of the International Institute. I'm going to ask for more, if you don't mind.
Well, all right. I have looked at the chat, and there is definitely a lot of people that have been very excited, and I encourage you to look at the chat, and they say how much they really appreciate what you have just shared with us, and how much hope you are providing us. And I have to say, the Hispanic Leaders Group is really looking forward to be able to continue to collaborate with the International Institute. Please keep us in mind. We have the same goals, we have the same desires for our community. And while we represent a relatively, I think, a decent group of the population, we definitely can achieve more with the collaboration, such as the forces that you would be touching with people. And so we appreciate your time tonight, and we thank all the people that were able to join us, and we look forward to having you at some other events, and you will be receiving more invitations to become part of a little bit more active with the Hispanic Leaders Group. So thank you for your time, and welcome. We are happy to have you, and to be part of that fight that we're doing for the immigrant community. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I consider myself part of this group, and I have to make sure that I do what it takes to become a full member of the group as well. That's what I'll be looking forward to. And I want to thank. I've seen all the comments. I really thank you all. Um, those words would only mean something if we do something about it together tomorrow. So let's get to work.
Well, thank you, everybody. We will be conclude this meeting, and we appreciate again for your presence tonight. And we'll see you at our next meeting. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything else? I think
We're done. I'm gonna close the meeting, and I appreciate your help, Maria. It was great.
Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Good night.